The emergency klaxon screamed across the bridge of the colony ship Determination as it dropped out of hyperspace into what should have been empty void. Instead, they found themselves in the middle of a war zone that painted the darkness with violent streams of energy and the twisted metal of dying ships. Reed gripped the armrest of his command chair as the tactical display lit up with contacts. Dozens of sleek alien vessels were locked in desperate combat with something that made his stomach turn. The enemy ships looked like crystalline spiders the size of skyscrapers, their surfaces pulsing with sickly bioluminescent patterns. They moved through space with an organic fluidity that no machine should possess, leaving trails of some kind, of acidic discharge that ate through anything it touched. The communications officer, a young woman named Beth, looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Sir, we're receiving a broad-spectrum transmission. Universal Translator is... It's working. They're speaking to us." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what was clearly an alien bridge. The being addressing them was tall and insectoid, with compound eyes that reflected the fires burning on his ship. When he spoke, his mandibles clicked in rhythm with his words, but the translator made his desperation clear. "Unknown vessel, you must retreat immediately. We are the Galactic Defense Union and we cannot guarantee your safety. These are the Devourers. They consume entire star systems. Your ship appears to be civilian. Please, for the sake of your species, run." Reed studied the tactical display. The alien ships were losing badly. Their weapons seemed to barely scratch the crystalline horrors, while every hit from the Devourers tore through their hulls like tissue paper. The defensive formation was collapsing, and several of the larger alien vessels were already venting atmosphere and debris. "Sir," his tactical officer spoke up, "those things are heading straight for the inhabited system behind the defense line. Long-range sensors show over 12 billion life signs on the third planet." Reed made his decision. "All hands, this is the captain. We came out here to build new homes among the stars. Looks like we need to clear some pests first. Battle stations." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. The Determination hadn't been built as a warship, but like every human vessel that ventured into the unknown, it was designed with the assumption that space was hostile. The colonists they carried weren't just farmers and engineers. They were humans, and humans had been preparing for war since they first picked up rocks and sticks. The ship's hull began to unfold like a deadly flower. Armor plating shifted and revealed weapon systems that had been hidden beneath the civilian exterior. Point defense arrays emerged from concealed ports. The main cargo bays opened to reveal launch tubes for kinetic bombardment systems. What had appeared to be a simple transport vessel transformed into something that would have given pause to any military force in human space. "Take us in," Reed ordered. "Full burn. Target the largest concentration of hostiles." The alien admiral's voice crackled over the comm again, filled with horror. "No, you don't understand. Your vessel cannot survive contact with the swarm. They will strip your hull and consume your crew. Please retreat while you still can." Reed activated the return channel. "Admiral, with respect, you've never seen humans fight. Beth, open a channel to all alien vessels. Tell them to clear our firing lanes." The Determination accelerated toward the heart of the battle at a speed that made the watching aliens gasp. The Devourer swarm turned toward this new threat, their crystalline forms shifting to present their weapons. Streams of bioacid and some kind of corrosive energy lanced out toward the human ship. The attacks never reached their target. The point defense systems that lined the Determination's hull came alive with a fury that turned the space around the ship into a wall of intercepting fire. Every projectile, every energy beam, every biological weapon was met and neutralized before it could touch the hull. Then the humans fired back. The main bombardment systems spoke with a voice like thunder. Tungsten rods accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, crossed the distance to the enemy formation in seconds. The kinetic energy of each projectile was enough to crack a moon, and the Determination fired them in volleys of dozens. The crystalline Devourers simply ceased to exist. The first volley removed 6 of the largest creatures from the universe in explosions that briefly outshone the local star. The second volley caught a cluster of smaller ones trying to flank the human ship. They became clouds of glittering dust that scattered into the void. The remaining devourers tried to scatter, but the determination's targeting systems were relentless. Secondary weapons batteries tracked and eliminated the fleeing enemies with the mechanical precision of an automated factory. In less than 10 minutes, the swarm that had been destroying the Union fleet was nothing but debris and fading energy signatures. Silence fell across the battlefield. The alien ships hung motionless in space, their crews struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Finally, the insectoid admiral's voice returned to the comm channel, shaking with disbelief. Your vessel. How many crew members constitute your military force? Your weapon systems are beyond anything in our databases. What kind of warship carries such firepower? Reed looked around his bridge at the men and women who were already beginning the process of retracting weapons and returning to civilian configuration. Most of them were still wearing the simple coveralls they had put on that morning, expecting another routine day of travel toward their new colony world. Military force? Reed couldn't help but chuckle. Admiral, we're farmers and engineers, teachers and mechanics. This is a colony ship. We were heading out to plant crops and build homes when we stumbled into your war. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a full minute. When the Admiral finally spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Colony ship? But your weapons, your defenses, how is this possible? Reed looked at the tactical display where the remains of the Devourer swarm continued to drift through space. Admiral, where we come from, space is dangerous. We've learned to be prepared. Every human ship is built to survive first contact with hostiles. Every human crew is trained to fight if necessary. We don't send our people into the dark unprepared. Another long pause. Then, tentatively, the alien admiral asked, Would you be willing to accompany our fleet back to Union headquarters? I believe the High Council would very much like to meet your species. Reed smiled, looking forward to the conversation. Ahead, humanity had just made first contact, and somehow he suspected it wasn't going to go the way the aliens expected. Admiral, we'd be honored, but I should probably mention that we're just one ship. If you think this is impressive, wait until you meet the rest of humanity. The great assembly hall of the Galactic Defense Union stretched out like a cathedral dedicated to bureaucracy and power. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species filled the tiered seating, their diverse forms creating a living rainbow of galactic civilization. At the center of it all, human Ambassador David sat at a simple metal table, looking remarkably calm for someone surrounded by the accumulated might of a million-year-old alliance. High Counselor Venth rose from his elevated platform, his chitinous form gleaming under the chamber's lights. The insectoid being had ruled the Union for over 2 centuries, and his presence commanded immediate silence from the assembled delegates. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute authority. Honored beings of the galaxy, Venth began, his compound eyes reflecting the lights as they swept across the chamber. Today we witness a historic moment. For the first time in 300 years, we welcome a new species into the protection of our great alliance. A ripple of approval ran through the crowd. The various species nodded, clicked, hummed, and made. Whatever sounds indicated agreement in their particular biology. David noticed how they all looked at him with a mixture of pity and anticipation, like adults watching a child about to receive a wonderful gift. Venth continued, his voice growing more ceremonious with each word. The species known as humanity has shown remarkable potential in their brief contact with our forces. They possess a certain primitive vigor that could prove useful to our common cause. Therefore, the High Council has decided to extend to them the greatest gift our civilization can offer. The chamber fell completely silent. This was clearly the moment everyone had been waiting for. David leaned back in his chair, genuinely curious about what was coming next. Humanity, Venth declared, spreading his forearms wide in a gesture of magnanimous generosity. We offer you membership in the Galactic Defense Union. Under our protection, your worlds will know peace. Our mighty fleets, tested across 1,000,000 years of conflict, will shield you from the darkness between stars. You will never again face threats like the Devourers alone. The assembled delegates burst into what David assumed was applause, though it sounded more like a zoo at feeding time. Various species clapped, chirped, whistled, and rattled in celebration of humanity's good fortune. Venth raised one arm for silence and continued. Let me share with you the magnificent scope of our protection. Our fleets patrol over 40,000 star systems. We have established peace across 1,200 species. Our defense stations guard the major hyperspace routes, ensuring safe passage for all who accept our guidance. When the Void Hunters emerged from dark space 2 centuries ago, we drove them back. When the machine collective threatened organic life itself, we stood firm. No force in the galaxy can stand against the combined might of the Union. David found himself genuinely impressed. A million-year civilization with that kind of track record was nothing to dismiss lightly. He made careful notes as Venth continued, listing the Union's achievements, military capabilities, and protective services. And now, Venth said, his voice taking on a businesslike tone, let us discuss the terms of your membership. As a new species, humanity will naturally start at the basic protection level. This requires a modest contribution of 12% of your total industrial capacity to our Common Defense Fund. Additionally, you will accept our guidance on expansion, limits to prevent conflicts with established territories. Our mediation councils will handle any disputes you may have with other species, ensuring that justice prevails. The other delegates nodded approvingly. These were standard terms, generous even. Most species had to pay much higher rates when they first joined, and the expansion limitations were quite reasonable. Venth spread his arms again, his gesture encompassing the entire chamber. In return for these modest contributions, humanity will receive the full protection of our fleets, access to our trade networks, and the security that comes from membership in the galaxy's greatest alliance. Your species will finally be safe. David tapped his stylus against his notepad, his expression thoughtful. Around the chamber, the various delegates waited expectantly for humanity's grateful acceptance of this generous offer. Some were already calculating trade opportunities with the new member species. Finally, David looked up at the High Counselor and smiled. That's all? The question hung in the air like a puzzle no one could solve. Several delegates activated their universal translators, certain they had missed something. The phrase was simple enough, but the context made no sense. Venth's compound eyes focused on the human with visible confusion. I'm sorry, Ambassador David. Could you clarify your question? David stood up, his movement casual and unhurried. I think there might be some confusion here, High Counselor. When we received your invitation to this meeting, we assumed you were interested in discussing a mutual defense agreement. You know, something where we help protect each other. A murmur ran through the chamber. Mutual defense was an ancient concept, something primitive species sometimes attempted before they learned better. The idea of the Union needing protection from anyone was almost amusing. But instead, David continued, his smile growing wider, you're offering to protect us in exchange for tribute and submission. That's certainly an offer, but I'm wondering if you might be interested in hearing our counter-proposal. The murmur grew louder. Several delegates were now talking among themselves, trying to understand what the human was suggesting. Counter-proposals were not part of the standard first contact protocol. Venth raised his arms for silence, his voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. Ambassador David, I believe you may not fully understand the situation. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are threats out there that could destroy your entire species without effort. The Devourers you encountered were merely scouts for larger forces. The protection we offer is not a luxury. It is a necessity for survival. David nodded thoughtfully. Oh, I understand the dangers perfectly, High Counselor. In fact, that's exactly what I wanted to discuss with you. You see, we came here assuming you wanted our protection. The silence that followed was so complete that the chamber's environmental system seemed loud by comparison. David looked around at the thousands of staring faces, each representing a species that had accepted Union protection as the natural order of things, David continued into the silence. You seem like nice people, but your military performance against the Devourers was, well, let's call it suboptimal. We were hoping we could help with that. High Counselor Venth's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of either excitement or extreme agitation. Help us? Ambassador, I believe you may not understand the scale of what you're suggesting. The Union has protected the galaxy for 1,000,000 years. Our combined fleets number in the hundreds of thousands. Our military budget exceeds the total economic output of most star systems. David's smile became genuinely warm, the kind of expression someone might wear when explaining something simple to a confused child. High Counselor, I appreciate your patience with me. Maybe it would help if I showed you some context about human defensive capabilities. Would that be all right? Before Venth could respond, David activated a holographic projector. The image that appeared above the assembly sent a shockwave of silence through the chamber that was almost physical in its intensity. The hologram showed Earth, but not the peaceful blue world the aliens expected. Instead, they saw a fortress, planet bristling with orbital defense platforms. Each platform, according to the scrolling data, carried enough firepower to sterilize a continent. This is our home system, David said conversationally. Those platforms are just the visible defenses. We have others you can't see from this angle. He touched a control and the image shifted to show other human worlds. Each was similarly defended, with military installations that dwarfed anything in the Union databases. The numbers that appeared alongside each image made several delegates check their translators again. We have 47 colony systems now, David noted. Each one is defended to at least this standard. Our merchant vessels, like the one you met, are built to survive hostile first contact scenarios. What you might call impressive defensive capabilities, we consider basic safety protocols. The chamber remained silent, but David could see the delegates beginning to do calculations. The military force represented in his casual presentation exceeded the combined might of the entire Union by several orders of magnitude. So, David concluded, turning back to face High Counselor Venth, would you be interested in discussing a real mutual defense pact? We'd be happy to help keep the galaxy safe. The ancient meditation chambers beneath Union headquarters had never hosted an emergency session before. Built into the living rock of the asteroid that served as the galactic government's home, these rooms were designed for quiet contemplation and spiritual reflection. Now they buzzed with panicked conversations as the Union's highest-ranking officials tried to process what they had learned about humanity. Admiral Toth paced the length of the circular chamber, his 6 legs clicking against the polished stone floor. The insectoid officer had commanded fleets for 3 decades, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the intelligence reports scattered across the central table. The data has been verified 17 times, he said, his mandibles clicking with agitation. 3 independent surveillance networks confirm it. The Devourer home galaxy is gone. Not conquered, not occupied, gone. Nothing remains but background radiation and scattered particles. Minister Dax, whose species had built their entire economy around providing security services to weaker civilizations, held up one of the reports with a shaking tentacle. 6 hours. They sterilized an entire galaxy containing over 4 billion Devourer entities in 6 hours. The assembled officials fell silent. The Devourer swarm had been the Union's greatest nightmare for over 2 centuries. These creatures didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them entirely, leaving nothing but empty space where star systems used to exist. The Union's entire military doctrine had been built around the assumption that the Devourers were an unstoppable force that could only be delayed, never defeated. High Counselor Venth stood at the chamber's center, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays that surrounded them. Each display showed a different aspect of human military capability, and each one painted a picture that challenged everything the Union thought it knew about warfare. Show me the Earth system analysis again, Venth commanded. The central hologram shifted to display humanity's home system in detail. What the initial scans had revealed as a peaceful world was actually a fortress that made Union strongholds look like children's toys. The moon had been hollowed out and converted into a manufacturing facility. The asteroid belt had been reorganized into a defensive grid. Mars hosted training facilities that could accommodate millions of soldiers simultaneously. Each orbital platform mounts weapons that exceed our Dreadnought-class firepower by a factor of 12, Admiral Toth reported, his voice hollow. And there are over 2,000 such platforms in the Earth system alone. The humans have 47 colony systems, each defended to similar standards. Minister Kral, whose crystalline form normally glowed with confidence, had dimmed to barely visible levels. How is this possible? Our intelligence networks span the galaxy. How did an entire civilization develop this level of capability without our knowledge? The answer came from an unexpected source. A junior intelligence analyst, barely old enough to have earned her position, stood near the chamber's entrance with a datapad clutched in her manipulator arms. Permission to speak, High Counselor? Venth gestured for her to continue. In times like these, any insight was valuable. Sir, I've been analyzing their historical communications. The humans never tried to hide their military capabilities from us. We simply filtered out the information because it seemed impossible. Our translation algorithms classified their factual military reports as entertainment fiction. She activated her datapad, and several holographic windows appeared around the chamber. Each one showed intercepted human communications that had been automatically categorized and ignored by Union intelligence. This is a routine shipping manifest from 18 months ago, the analyst explained. It lists the cargo of a merchant vessel as including standard defensive systems rated for Class 7 hostile contact. Our computers marked it as creative writing because a Class 7 rating exceeds the firepower of our battle cruisers. Another window opened. This is a personal message from a human colonist to his family. He mentions that their new settlement has basic perimeter defenses installed and ready for activation. The defensive grid he describes casually could hold off a Union fleet indefinitely. The revelations continued. Human children played with toys that simulated battles involving weapons the Union couldn't build. Human entertainment featured scenarios where their heroes fought against odds that the Union would consider mathematically impossible. Human news reports discussed military exercises as routine training events, but the forces involved exceeded anything the Union could deploy. They've been completely open about their capabilities, the analyst concluded. We just couldn't believe what they were telling us. Admiral Toth stopped pacing and turned to face the assembled officials. There's more. The humans have been monitoring our communications for over 18 months. They know about our internal political structure, our military capabilities, our diplomatic procedures. They've been studying us the entire time. Are they planning to conquer us? Minister Dax's voice was barely above a whisper. High Counselor. Venth was quiet for a long moment, processing everything they had learned. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of a civilization's worldview crumbling. I don't think conquest is what they have in mind. Their ambassador made an interesting statement yesterday. He said they came to us assuming we wanted their protection. Not that we needed it. Not that we would accept it in exchange for tribute. He seemed genuinely surprised that we were offering to protect them. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Union's entire model of galactic civilization was based on the strong protecting the weak in exchange for resources and loyalty. The idea of a species offering protection without demanding anything in return was almost incomprehensible. What do they want from us? Minister Kral asked, his crystalline form flickering with confusion. Before anyone could answer, an aide rushed into the chamber carrying an urgent message. High Counselor, we've received a communication from the human fleet. They're requesting permission to establish defensive stations in our border systems. They say there are hostile forces massing in dark space, and they want to help protect our outer colonies. The officials exchanged glances. After everything they had learned, the offer should have been reassuring. Instead, it raised new questions that none of them were prepared to answer. What do they want in return? Admiral Toth asked the aide. Nothing, sir. They say it's what good neighbors do for each other. High Counselor Venth closed his eyes, his compound lenses shuddering as he tried to process this new reality. A species more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen was offering protection and asking for nothing in return. It went against every principle of galactic politics. Contact Ambassador David, Venth finally commanded. Tell him we accept their offer of mutual defense. and ask him if he would be willing to explain to the council how human civilization actually works. As the officials began to file out of the chamber, the junior analyst approached High Counselor Venth. "Sir, there's one more thing. I've been analyzing their entertainment broadcasts, trying to understand their culture better. What did you find? They have thousands of stories about powerful beings using their strength to protect weaker ones without asking for anything in return. They call them heroes, sir. I think they actually believe that's what strength is for." Venth stared at the holographic displays still showing human military might. A civilization that saw ultimate power as a tool for protection rather than domination. It was either the most beautiful thing he had ever encountered or the most terrifying. Perhaps, he thought, it was both. The emergency assembly that convened 7 days after first contact represented the largest gathering of galactic leadership in over 3 centuries. Species that hadn't spoken to each other in generations sat in the same chamber, united by the singular need to understand what humanity's arrival meant for the established order of things. President Laura materialized in the center of the chamber through a quantum transmission link that made several delegates gasp. The technology required to maintain stable communication across galactic distances was beyond most civilizations, yet the humans deployed it as casually as others might use a simple radio. Behind the president's projected image, visible through the transparent dome of what appeared to be a massive space station, the assembled might of the Human Defense Force hung in formation. The ships were so large that they distorted space around them, and so numerous that they stretched beyond the visual horizon. Each vessel dwarfed the Union's largest dreadnoughts, and there were hundreds of them visible in just this single view. "Thank you for hosting this emergency session," President Laura began, her voice warm despite the formal setting. "I understand our arrival has created some confusion about how galactic politics work. We'd like to propose some changes that we think will benefit everyone." Merchant Prince Dax of the Trade Federation shifted uncomfortably in his specialized seating. His species had built their entire economy around the traditional protection model, selling security services to weaker civilizations. The prospect of change made his bioluminescent patches flicker with anxiety. "President Laura," he began, his translator struggling with the complex harmonics of his language, "the current system has maintained peace for over 1,000,000 years. The strong protect the weak, and the weak provide resources to maintain that protection. It's a stable arrangement that has prevented galactic war." Laura nodded thoughtfully. "I can see how that system might work for a while, but we've noticed some problems with it. The civilizations paying for protection don't seem to be developing their own defensive capabilities. That makes them completely dependent on others for survival. Where we come from, we think people should be able to protect themselves." A murmur ran through the assembly. The idea of client species developing independent military capabilities was revolutionary. Under the current system, such development was actively discouraged to maintain the protection hierarchy. "Furthermore," Laura continued, gesturing to the fleet visible behind her, "we've run some calculations on the efficiency of the current defensive arrangements. Your response times to distant threats average between 6 and 18 months. By the time Union forces arrive at a crisis point, most conflicts are already over." Admiral Toth's compound eyes focused intently on the human president. "Our response times are limited by the realities of interstellar travel and communication. Even our fastest ships require weeks to cross major galactic distances." "We understand," Laura replied. "That's why we're proposing a different approach. Instead of centralized fleets responding to crises after they develop, we'd establish defensive stations in key systems that can respond immediately to threats. Our stations can engage hostile forces within minutes of detection and maintain contact with response fleets across the galaxy." She touched a control, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber showing the proposed defensive network. The stations were massive, each one capable of defending multiple star systems simultaneously. The coverage was comprehensive, reaching sectors that the Union had never been able to adequately protect. The response time for any threat would be reduced from months to hours, Laura explained. And because the stations are automated and supplied through quantum logistics networks, there would be no need for tribute or ongoing payments from protected systems. The silence that followed was profound. Minister Kral's crystalline form flickered rapidly as he processed the implications. You're proposing to protect the entire galaxy without requiring any payment at all? Payment? Laura looked genuinely confused. Why would we charge people for protection? That would be like charging someone for helping them when they're in danger. It just doesn't make sense. Counselor Venth leaned forward in his elevated position. President Laura, how does your civilization benefit from this arrangement? Resources must be allocated, personnel must be assigned, equipment must be maintained. What do you gain from protecting others without compensation? Laura's expression brightened as if she had been asked about her favorite hobby. We gain everything. When our neighbors are safe and prosperous, they become better trading partners. When civilizations aren't spending all their resources on basic survival, they can focus on scientific advancement, cultural development, and exploration. The technologies we develop together, the art we create, the discoveries we make, those benefits are worth far more than any tribute payment. She gestured again, and the display changed to show human trade relationships with the few species they had already encountered. The economic activity was staggering, with technology transfers and resource exchanges that dwarfed the traditional tribute model by orders of magnitude. When people are free to develop their full potential instead of living in fear, everyone benefits, Laura continued. We've learned that the strongest civilizations are the ones where everyone has the opportunity to contribute their best work. Ambassador Frey of the Pacifist Eternals spoke up, her crystalline voice ringing like wind chimes. This philosophy is beautiful, President Laura, but surely there must be species that would abuse such generosity. What happens when someone takes advantage of your protection without contributing anything in return? Laura shrugged, a gesture that somehow conveyed both understanding and dismissal. Then we still protect them. Our defensive capabilities don't depend on their cooperation. Whether a civilization contributes or not, doesn't change their right to exist safely. The concept was so alien to established galactic thinking that several delegates requested clarification through their translators. The idea of protection as an unconditional right rather than a purchased service challenged fundamental assumptions about how civilization worked. You would protect civilizations that actively opposed you? Minister Dax asked, his bioluminescent patches now strobing with confusion. Of course, Laura replied without hesitation. Our strength exists to protect others, not to punish them for disagreeing with us. If a civilization opposed us but was threatened by external forces, we'd still defend them. Their political opinions don't affect their right to survival. Hi. Counselor Venth stood slowly, his ancient frame carrying the weight of a million-year-old civilization's paradigm shift. President Laura, your proposal would fundamentally restructure galactic civilization. The economic systems, political arrangements, and social hierarchies that have existed for millennia would need to be completely reimagined. We understand that change is difficult, Laura acknowledged. We're not asking anyone to accept our proposal immediately. We're suggesting a trial period where we establish defensive stations in a few key systems and demonstrate how the new approach works. If civilizations prefer the old system, they're free to maintain their existing arrangements. She paused, letting the offer settle in the minds of the assembled delegates. But we think you'll find that when people aren't afraid when they don't have to spend their resources on basic survival, when they're free to pursue their dreams and ambitions, that's when civilizations truly flourish. The chamber fell quiet as thousands of beings contemplated a future where strength was used to lift others up rather than keep them down. For many, it was the first time they had ever imagined an alternative to the system they had always known. Finally, a small voice spoke from one of the lower tiers. It was Representative Tim of the Smallest Voices Coalition, a group that represented civilizations too weak to afford traditional protection services. President Laura, Tim said, his translator carrying the hope in his tiny voice across the chamber, when could you start? The question that followed was not whether to accept humanity's proposal, but how quickly the galaxy could adapt to a future where protection was a gift rather than a commodity. The bridge of the patrol vessel, Vigilant, hummed with quiet efficiency as it completed another routine sweep of the outer rim territories. 6 months had passed since the restructuring of galactic civilization, and Commander Torres still marveled at how quickly things had changed. Her crew was a testament to that transformation, humans working alongside Luminars, Resonants, and Eternals, all united by a shared commitment to protecting the galaxy. Long-range sensors are picking up something unusual, reported her sensor, Officer Beth, whose Luminar physiology allowed her to interpret energy patterns that human technology couldn't detect on its own. Unknown configuration, massive energy signatures, definitely artificial and definitely not in our databases. Torres settled into her command chair, feeling the familiar weight of command. Around her, the mixed crew moved with the practiced coordination that had developed over months of working together. The aliens who had volunteered to serve alongside humans had initially been surprised by human military culture. The emphasis on individual initiative, the expectation that every crew member could think independently, the absence of rigid hierarchies based on species or origin. Distance and heading, Torres asked. 2 light years out and closing on the 7th sector. Current trajectory puts them in contact with the Harmony colonies in approximately 14 hours. Beth's tendrils flickered with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated concern in her species. Torres nodded grimly. The Harmony colonies were home to over 8 billion beings across 12 worlds. They were also one of the civilizations that had initially been skeptical of human protection, preferring to rely on their own defensive measures. That skepticism had turned to gratitude when human defensive stations had quietly activated during a pirate raid 3 months ago, eliminating the threat before the colonists even knew they were in danger. Signal the Council worlds, Torres ordered. Unknown hostile force detected. Threat assessment in progress, response being initiated. Her communications officer, a human named Rick, looked up from his station. Signal transmitted, Commander. Council acknowledgement received. They're standing by for updates. The transformation of galactic civilization hadn't been without challenges. Many species had struggled to adapt to the concept of protection without obligation. The Trade Federation had initially attempted to maintain their traditional tribute relationships, only to find their clients preferring human protection services that came without strings attached. Some military organizations had disbanded entirely, their purpose eliminated by human defensive networks that made traditional warfare obsolete. But the changes had also brought unprecedented prosperity. Species that had spent centuries dedicating vast resources to basic survival were now free to pursue science, art, and exploration. The technological advances achieved in just 6 months of true cooperation exceeded what the galaxy had accomplished in the previous millennium. Contact is accelerating, Beth reported, her sensor readings becoming more urgent. Energy signatures are increasing exponentially. Commander, whatever that thing is, it's powerful enough to sterilize entire systems. Torres studied the tactical display as the unknown force resolved into individual contacts. They were mechanical in nature, constructed from some kind of crystalline metal that seemed to absorb and redirect energy. Their technology was completely unknown, but their intent was unmistakable. They were heading directly for populated worlds, and their energy patterns suggested weapons of unimaginable destructive power. All stations, battle alert, Torres commanded. Helm, intercept course, maximum burn. As the Vigilant accelerated toward the threat, something unprecedented began to happen. Other ships appeared on the tactical display, not human vessels responding to orders, but Union ships, former clients and traditional allies, arriving to join the fight. The first to arrive was the Eternal Peace, flagged from the pacifist Eternal Consortium. The Eternals had never built warships before humans arrived, but they had quickly adapted their exploration vessels with human defensive technology. Behind them came vessels from the Trade Federation, the Crystal Collective, even the Isolationist, Deep Thinkers. Commander Torres, came a transmission from the Eternal Peace. This is Captain Melody requesting permission to join your formation. Our people voted unanimously to stand with humanity against this threat. Torres felt a surge of emotion that she hadn't expected. 6 months ago, these species had been clients and protectors in a rigid hierarchy. Now, they were choosing to fight, alongside humans not because they were ordered to, not because they feared consequences, but because they believed it was right. Permission granted, Captain Melody. Welcome to the party. More ships continued to arrive as the combined fleet approached. The unknown threat. The tactical display showed a force that would have been impossible under the old system. Species that had been enemies for generations flying together, former rivals coordinating their attacks, civilizations that had never trusted each other, sharing targeting data and tactical information. The enemy force became clearer as they closed distance. The mechanical entities were unlike anything in galactic databases, their crystalline forms shifting and adapting as they moved through space. They had already consumed 2 uninhabited systems, stripping them of all matter and energy, leaving behind only empty void where planets and stars had once existed. Fleet composition now includes vessels from 47 different species, Rick reported from his communications station. Admiral Toth is requesting overall tactical command, but he's deferring to your experience with unknown hostiles. Torres opened a channel to the fleet. All vessels, this is Commander Torres aboard the Vigilant. We're facing an unknown enemy, with unknown capabilities. Stay flexible, watch each other's backs, and remember that we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who can't fight for themselves. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Voices in dozens of languages filled the comm channels with affirmations, battle cries, and expressions of unity that would have been impossible to imagine just months before. The battle, when it came, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The mechanical entities were powerful beyond measure, their weapons capable of tearing through conventional shields and armor as if they didn't exist. But they faced something they had never encountered before: a truly united galaxy. Human defensive. Technologies merged seamlessly with alien innovations. Eternal defensive screens protected Trade Federation vessels, while their energy weapons punched through enemy defenses. Crystal Collective ships provided sensor data that allowed Luminaire vessels to target enemy weak points. The coordination was perfect, born not of rigid command structures but of genuine cooperation and mutual trust. The mechanical swarm fought with the cold efficiency of pure logic, but they couldn't adapt to the creative chaos of dozens of species, working together in ways they had never worked before. Tactics that should have failed succeeded because alien crews improvised solutions that no computer could predict. Weapons that should have been ineffective became devastating when combined with technologies from completely different paradigms. When the last enemy vessel was reduced to drifting debris, the combined fleet hung together in space, crews from across the galaxy sharing a moment of triumph that transcended species barriers. They had faced the unknown together and emerged victorious, not because they were forced to fight, but because they chose to stand together. Torres received a priority transmission from High Counselor Venth, now serving as coordinator of the restructured Galactic Cooperation Council. His compound eyes reflected a depth of emotion that his species rarely displayed publicly. Commander Torres, the Council worlds want to express their gratitude. The threat you faced could have destroyed entire civilizations. Is there anything we can do to repay humanity's protection? Torres looked around her bridge at the mixed crew of humans and aliens who had fought together, bled together, and emerged victorious together. Through the viewports, she could see the combined fleet, beginning the work of search and rescue, helping damaged vessels and caring for wounded crews regardless of their species or origin. Just keep being good neighbors, Counselor. That's all we've ever wanted. As the fleet began to disperse, returning to their home systems and regular duties, Torres noticed something that filled her with quiet pride. Construction ships were already arriving at the battle site, beginning work on a new research station. It would be a joint project between 12 different species, designed to study the remains of the mechanical threat and develop better defenses against similar dangers. The old galaxy had been ruled by fear, with the strong dominating the weak and everyone looking out only for themselves. The new galaxy was different. It was built on the radical idea that strength existed to protect others, that diversity made everyone stronger, and that the best defense against the unknown was to face it together. Torres settled back in her command chair and smiled. Humanity had come to the stars expecting to find wonders and dangers in equal measure. They had found something better. They had found friends worth fighting for, and neighbors worth protecting. The galaxy had learned that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology or weapons or ancient wisdom. It was the simple human belief that everyone deserved to be safe, and that those with the power to protect others had the responsibility to do so. Not for profit, not for control, not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy had become a place where strength was measured, not by what you could take, but by what you chose to give. And in that transformation, both humanity and their alien neighbors had found something that had been missing from galactic civilization for far too long. They had found hope.